today are Jerome and Bob. I'll start by introducing Bob. He is a Queensland rank-and-file trade unionist who has been active since he was, and in a trade union since he was 15 years old. He recently led a 9-week strike and picket at the Queensland Children's Hospital involving 600 unionists. As a result of his role in that, he's facing now 18 charges of contempt of court, as well as being prosecuted for nuisance. And he faces a possible prison sentence as a result of that, and also up to $400,000 worth of fines. This is a campaign that is obviously going to need solidarity in challenging. And you see that there's leaflets that have gone around if you want to know about getting involved in helping out in that campaign. We're also going to take a photo at the end of the session holding up posters, so stick around, don't leave too soon so that we can all be involved in that. First up, we're going to hear from Jerome. He is a long-time construction unionist in the CFMEU, and he's also Socialist Alternatives Industrial Organiser.
Well, if you want an idea of what's at stake when we're talking about anti-union laws, all you'd have to do is walk down Swanston Street yesterday afternoon after 3 p.m. and you would have seen this scene. According to the police spokesman, just watch your elbow there, eh? According to the police spokesman, the two people who died, two young people who died under this wall collapse in Swanston Street were simply, and I quote, at the wrong place and the wrong time. And it seems like a busy Thursday afternoon in Swanston Street is both the wrong place and the wrong time. Of course, there's more to it than that. The cause of the wind collapse, the brick collapse, was a pretty freakish sort of gust of wind, so you could say it's an act of God. If you take a closer look, this hoarding here is pretty well supported by all these props. Obviously, the section of brickwork that was supported, that collapsed and killed those two people, was barely supported at all, and certainly not well enough to support a heritage-listed brick wall which has been there for, what, 60, 70, 80 years from falling and killing two people. So you have to ask who is in charge of safety on this particular site. And of course, it's a Grocon site, which takes us back to the events, the very dramatic events. Okay. Takes us back to, yeah, we will get back there, yeah. We're told not to concentrate too much on the history, so we won't hear a lot about the Labourers' Ordinance of 1349. It takes us back to the very dramatic events that happened in Lonsdale Street, actually, in Melbourne, in August and September of last year, where you had literally thousands of construction workers turning up morning after morning in a mass blockade of that construction site owned by Grocon over the issue of safety, and especially over the issue of safety reps on the site. And it leaves a really sickening taste in my mouth. Look, the CFMU didn't walk away from that dispute. The dispute is ongoing, but we finished that picket line without winning union-appointed safety reps on Grocon sites. And this morning we have another 2 people dead, and one still, I believe, on the critical list as a result of faulty safety over that very issue. So the reason that the CFMU suspended its picket line in Lonsdale Street last year had a lot to do with the various anti-union laws which apply in this country. They were facing not only a legal suit from the Inheritor Organisation, the Australian Building and Construction Commission, not only a legal suit from Grollo himself, but because of an injunction that had been won by Grollo in the Supreme Court, were facing damages bills that ran into the millions of dollars. So, you can look at this fatal wall collapse yesterday and say, well, this, chances are this is, a consequence of the sort of anti-union laws that we have in this country. And of course, the consequences don't just, apply to human life and human limb. There's the fact that we've had, this colossal mining boom in this country, but actually the gains of that boom have been overwhelmingly with the bosses, compared to, say, the mining boom back in the early 80s, where it was actually the working class that managed to break through and win some quite decent gains out of that boom. You can look at the 12-hour shifts being reintroduced in resources. You can look at the world record-breaking rate of casualisation that applies to Australian workers. You can look at the average Australian worker working 5 weeks of unpaid overtime in any given year. There's no law about any of this, or there is, but it's not enforced. But when it comes to anti-union laws, these are rigorously enforced. Just one example. Last year, there was a case finalised in the before the Sydney Industrial Relations Commission, the New South Wales Industrial Relations Commission, and there was a couple of years previously there'd been a young man, Wade Brakeman, in a metal shop in Western Sydney, a 15-year-old trying out for an apprenticeship. He'd been working on a lathe, leant against it, got sucked into the machine, his arm was amputated, and he died 2 days later. When that case was finalised last year, the boss turned up, pleaded guilty to not maintaining a safe workplace, and got off with a $30,000 fine. So keep that in your head, $30,000 for a young man's life. A couple of months later, there was another case finalised. This one was in the federal court where it ended up. This was about industrial action that happened at a series of airports in 2009. Baggage handlers at Qantas in Perth were told that some of their work, they were going to be working alongside people that would be doing exactly the same work, working for an outsourced company and being paid a third less than what the Qantas workers were being paid. So they walked off the job in protest at this outsourcing threat to their jobs. That action lasted allegedly for about 4 hours. Over that 4 hours, the industrial action spread to Adelaide Airport, Melbourne, and I think it was Brisbane. The total of fines levied on the union officials, and the damages that Qantas won in that case, finalised last year, was just short of $750,000. So you can kill a man and pay 30 grand, you can go on strike for 4 hours or less, and it ends up $750,000. He could have killed people 25 times over, Wade Brakeman's boss, and still get off lighter. Thank you. Okay, so that gives you some idea. Like this isn't really a talk about the law, but it is important to realise, that's how heavily, the balance is sort of weighted to penalising union activities in this country. You can talk about the Fair Work Act. I've got a lot of examples. I don't have time to go through them all, but there's clauses in the Fair Work Act. You can't endanger the life, personal safety, welfare of the population or a part of it. Now, that thing about the welfare of the population or a part of it, about a year ago, Schweppes locked out its workforce in Melbourne and then applied to the Industrial Relations, or to Fair Work rather, to end their industrial action, push it into arbitration and get 12-hour shifts on the basis that Schweppes' lockout was endangering the welfare of its workers. Now that didn't quite fly, they did manage to get into arbitration, but that's the sort of argument that goes on. Licensed engineers who were told that their continued checking of Qantas planes in accordance with how they'd spent their working lives, every time it lands it gets a quick check. No, we don't want the licensed engineers to do that, says Qantas. We'll just get the pilots out, they'll go around, kick the tyres and have a look, that'll be fine. Licensed engineers said no, thank you, we'll keep doing our job. That was classified as unlawful industrial action, and the workers of the union were directed to stop checking the planes on pain of fines, contempt and all the rest of it. So it gives you some idea. The Fair Work Act, of course, is just the start of it. There's Emergency Services Acts in every state. You've got Trade Practices Act, there's clauses in there. There's local council bylaws, that could be used against picketers and so on. Like every form of industrial action is extremely legally restricted. And this goes back a hell of a long way. As I said, I've been told to keep the history to a minimum, so I won't talk a lot about the Statute of Labourers, which, according to Marx and Capital, is one of the very first laws that tries to regulate any sort of industrial action. And this is in 1349. The Black Plague had swept through Europe. Labour was at a real premium, and the small band of wage labourers tried to use this opportunity to force their wages up. The law states, seeing the straits of the masters and the scarcity of servants, and the servants are not willing to serve unless they receive excessive wages, considering the grave inconveniences which might come from the lack especially of ploughmen and such labourers, blah blah blah, if a reaper or mower or other workman do depart from service before the end of the term agreed without permission or reasonable cause, he shall undergo the penalty of imprisonment. And the same if you take higher wages than before. So I guess that's really the second point. There's nothing new in all of this. Like, it goes back a long way. And it's fundamental to a society, it reflects a society where wage labour is absolutely fundamental to everything that goes on, but the wage labourer has no control over how our labour is spent. And so in order to get us to work, You know, we're compelled in a variety of economic ways, but you know, the ability, what should be a basic human right to say no, we're not working, is legally taken from us in, you know, dozens, probably hundreds of ways. And this, you know, this isn't just some accident, it's not just something that happens to happen, it's something that's built into the nature of the class society that we live in. Which is to say that we're not going to get a capitalist society without anti-union laws. You know, it's just inconceivable that, you know, the so-called masters will let their gravediggers organise, you know, that freely. What we do have is a constant struggle about how much space, you know, the workers have and how much space our organisations, the unions, have. Henry Ford once reportedly complained, excuse me, how come every time I want a pair of hands, I get a human being? You know, all he wants is our labour power, you know, the use of our hands and our brains. But unfortunately, he gets the rest of us. He gets the whole human being. And, you know, like, when you're put in that situation, you know at some level or other that you're being ripped off, that there is something fundamentally unjust about what makes you human, your ability to labour, being sold on the market and, you know, used by someone else for their purpose and often against your purpose. The result of that, of course, is periodic revolt against the legal restrictions that we have on our ability to withdraw our labour. And now the Statute of Labourers was passed in 1349, 1351. It was actually repealed in 1863. So next time you hear the union leaders say we're in for a long campaign, just some sort of sense of perspective, yeah. But the important thing is that it was actually turned into a dead letter in a revolt that looked a little bit like this. And I've already given away the punchline. This is the Archbishop of Canterbury about to lose his head in the Peasants' Revolt of 1381. That was sparked actually by the poll tax. But if you read the histories of the era, the Statute of Labourers, that restriction on trying to seek higher wages, was one of the background causes for the Peasants' Revolt in England in 1381. And the counties where that law was most rigorously applied were the counties where the revolt was the most intense. The result of scenes like this, I mean, it's not the only beheading that happened. This is poor old Wat Tyler, the leader of the revolt, about to lose his head while the king looks on. The revolt was bloodily put down, but one of the results was that the ruling class all of a sudden had something to think about when it came to applying these these very first anti-union laws. And you can go through the entire history, that's happened since then, and there's a very similar sort of pattern. People will rise up, and even though there will still be laws against unions and against the right to strike, there'll be a certain amount of space opened up. But it's worth emphasising, because these laws have always existed, every single thing that our unions have won has actually been won in the face of these laws. So whether you take the 8-hour day, whether you take the weekend, whether you take superannuation, long service leave, health and safety, every single one of the strikes that have won these things have been subject to some sort of legal sanction. So again, that's worth bearing in mind. The next time you hear, well, we can't step outside the law, this is the only way that people have been able to make gains down the centuries. And in 1965, Judge Gallagher clearly expressed the arbitration commission's attitude to strikes. Quote, "I think there is no such right to strike, and the sooner that belief is abandoned, the better for this country and the better for every working man." Fortunately, people disregarded his advice, as we'll see in just a second. So these laws are always going to be around, but what we see is sort of patterns of mass defiance which manage to create a certain legal space. And what I want to do for the next couple of minutes is talk through one of the most famous examples in Australian history of one of these mass revolts, our own peasants' revolt sort of thing. This was in 1969, and people have probably heard about Clary O'Shea, pictured here, being taken to Pentridge Prison out in Coburg in Melbourne. He was the secretary of the Tramways Union, and he was facing jail rather than open the books of the union so the union could extract, so the industrial court could extract fines from the union. The response of this is 1969, May, what day are we? Thursday, May the 19th. The response of workers to Clary O'Shea being jailed by the industrial court for refusing to comply, and pay the fines and so on, was a campaign of rolling strikes that started here in Melbourne and spread rapidly throughout the country over the next week. So some of the slides will let you know. It's deliberate disobedience, says the court. I've got that right. This is the same to the Battle of Little Bourke Streets, and I don't know if Trevor's here, it was his first demonstration. 65,000 will stop work in Queensland, so we've got all of that. This is on the Saturday. You know that you're in Melbourne in football season when there's a general strike going on and you can still have football on the front page. And this is the classic sort of, the leadership that we expect from the ACTU. Like people are going out in Queensland, people are going out in West Australia, people are, Victoria is paralysed off and on, and the ACTU is waiting for someone to pick up the phone and talk to them. And this, you can't really see. Oh, so got. Was the whole point of this exercise, was that I've got a little sheaf of sort of handouts from the Age and the Herald and so on, which will give you a bit of a feel for the actual strike. I'm going to get them down there. Cheers. Okay. The Governor-General's pictured here. This is on the Monday of the strike. He was having a hard time in Canberra. His personal driver actually went out on strike as well. So this is what about day 4. We've got stops in all states. Basically every industrial area from the Pilbara down to Wollongong and everywhere in between was paralysed by rolling strikes. Rolled on into the next day. Obviously some people didn't approve of it, and the Herald was very happy to publicise that. Nothing but strife in cold, miserable old Melbourne. Nothing seems to change, thank you. And by the Tuesday and the Wednesday, obviously the ruling class is starting to feel the heat. This is someone who rode across Sydney Harbour to get to work. Every scab is a hero in the Herald, as you can see. But the result of all of this was O'Shea walking free. After just on a week of rolling industrial action around the country. And it was this rolling strike in 1969 that opened a pretty wide legal space for the unions to operate in. A lot of the really great gains that unions made in the early 1970s in terms of wages, health and safety and so on, was done in the legal environment created by basically totally, turning these penal powers which were being defied into a dead letter. The famous green bans of the Builders Labourers Federation also happened in this period. It was, there were obviously intense legal pressure on unions the further they took it, but, this strike, the Clary O'Shea strike, really opened the floodgates. So, it's worth noting too, this strike didn't come from nowhere, there was quite a prehistory to it, starting in the mid-1960s with a series of unsuccessful strikes actually, or partially successful strikes in automotive. There was a real groundswell by the late 1960s. It wasn't obviously the ACTU or the top level of the union officials that, called these strikes. In fact, we can see after Clary O'Shea is freed, oh no, sorry, I missed that slide. One of the things going around after he was freed, then the ACTU comes out and says, oh, maybe unions should consider not paying the fines. So, again, the sort of leadership that we expect. But yeah, it was very much the culmination of a years-long union revival from the mid-1960s, which came very much from the bottom up. One of the crucial factors in that was the Communist Party, or to be, by that time I think we were up to 3 Communist parties in this country. And there was plenty of things wrong with those Communist parties. There's Stalinism, all sorts of things wrong with them, which explains why they're not really around today. But there was enough right about them that they were able to play a key role in the events around the Clary O'Shea strike, It was a network of politicised militants with some sort of anti-capitalist politics that was able to, play a lead in individual workplaces, play a lead in unions, put pressure on union officials to actually listen to the rank and file, and they got enough right in this situation to basically totally destroy the repressive apparatus which had been used up until that time to keep unions in check all through the 50s and 60s. It's pretty hard to do that when there's 1 or 2 of you in just 1 or 2 workplaces, but basically that is our project as Socialist Alternative, is to contribute to the building of that sort of organisation, which can play a role in this sort of class combat. Okay, so today, obviously we have some extremely vicious anti-union laws. Paul Keating granted us the supposed right to strike back about 20 years ago, and because there's this tiny little window of, you know, the potential for protected, legally protected industrial action, you know, most unions, most of the time, will just follow that narrow little path. You know, 99.9% of the time, you're not allowed to walk out on strike. Some devastating safety thing happens on site, you can't walk out on strike in protest, and so on. We've had a lot of setbacks since the days of Clary-O'Shea, the years of neoliberalism, the years of union retreat, and so on. But one of the real, you know, one of the biggest things missing is the sort of organisation that the communist parties collectively represented. In 1950, Helen Palmer wrote a poem. It was just after the miners' strike in 1949, where a whole bunch of leaders of the miners' union were actually jailed for daring to collect solidarity funds to give to miners while they were on strike. She wrote that poem about the extraordinary shearers' strikes in the 1890s, and her final line sums it all up. For everyone that's sentenced, there's 10,000 won't forget. Where they jail a man for striking, it's a rich man's country yet. And while we're living in that rich man's country, we should remember that it's, you know, we can talk tactics about, you know, how to defy, how to go about it, all the rest of it, but we should remember that strategy of Clary-O'Shea, that strategy of mass defiance, is the only way that our side has made gains, and it's the only side that will be able to break these legal restrictions which shackle our unions currently. So I'll leave it there.
Chance for discussion after Bob speaks, but if you could welcome him now.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Louisa, and thanks, Jerome. That's a wonderful précis of the history of anti-union laws and the way that they've been used against workers, and it certainly sets the stage for some of the things that I would like to talk about. But just before I start, could our comrade from the Philippines, could he stand up? Okay. Mike Barber, could you stand up, comrade? Steve, Ian, Peter Close. Okay. These comrades are, is Peter there? You think so? There he is. These comrades are men that I know, and with our comrade from the Philippines, I had the huge pleasure of, with all of our comrades here last night, of listening to him speak. But these men who are standing are all rank and filers. They were all members of the Maritime Union and members of the Old Seamen's Union, and they were all, and still are, wonderful trade unionists. And it's on men and women here on those on whose shoulders that we stand. And these comrades who are standing up have been of enormous support to me in some of the very difficult times that I've gone through in my life as a rank and file militant, and at times as an elected official. And I think really they're the people that we should, you know, whatever I'm capable of doing is okay, but it's because of the bravery of these men and knowing that you have men like that behind you is that we can go forward. So these anyone here has, and there's some very talented people here, has the time to talk to my dear comrade Peter Close there. Peter was the delegate in the Melbourne Tugs for many, many years. And the Melbourne Tugs, under Peter's leadership, was the closest workplace I've seen in my working life anywhere in the world that reached a point of workers' control under capitalism. It was an extraordinary, extraordinary workplace for well over 4 decades. Absolutely extraordinary. Okay. Comrades, with regards to I guess, my story, that Comrade Tom Bramble has been so kind to me to say that some of the comrades here would like to hear, is that I've been a Northern Trade Unionist since I was a young lad. I came from a militant stock of trade unionists. My dad was a merchant seaman for over 40 years. He went away on the Australian coast in late 1945. His nickname on the Australian waterfront was Fuck 'em. A rather unique character, extreme ultra-left industrial politics, a wobbly, and a middle-of-the-road Labor man. And Australia was a very interesting country in that respect. We've thrown up a lot of those sort of men. But good old Fuckham had some very strong ideas of trade unionism that he rammed down my throat from ever since we were about knee-high to a grasshopper. Do a day's work, love your family, look after your union, because that's all a working man's got in this life. And so that's, I guess, what I've tried to do to some degree. I was a great recruit to the Socialist Party of Australia. I was a budding young Stalinist when I was about 18. I was their champion paper seller. I had a touch of violence about me when I was a young bloke, and I sort of like just jammed it down people's throats. You know, they'd say, would you like to buy a Guardian? And they'd say no. I'd say, well, what are you, some sort of fucking right-winger or something? You know? Then I'd fall out of a pub and then try to jam it down the first person's throat I saw. But anyway, I'd become such a great a paper seller, because I ended up buying about 50 a week out of my own pocket and giving it away, you know. You're not supposed to do that either. Anyway, so out of that came, out of the blue, they asked me to go to the Soviet Union, to go to the Marxist-Leninist Institute. And so off I trotted to the Marxist-Leninist Institute to become a great theoretical Marxist. And that didn't work, because I became a great theoretical faller in love with the Danish woman. And I ended up living in Denmark for about 3 years. I didn't go back to Australia. And I was subsequently expunged from the Socialist Party, my name never to be mentioned again, because I fell in love with someone. So after about 3 years, I came back to Australia and I shipped out, and it all sort of started from there, I guess. 1985, I was involved in the CQEB dispute, and I was arrested 9 times. And I ended up doing 3 weeks in prison because I refused to sign bail conditions, maximum security at Bogger Road. And a lot of people unions had organised that I'd have bail heard in the Supreme Court of Queensland, and I said no, I wouldn't do that, because I didn't want workers' money wasted on a Supreme Court judge and chambers hearing. And so I did 3 weeks, and I went back to the Magistrates Court, telling them that I'd never signed the conditions. And anyone who knows how the legal system works is that one level of court never overrides the same level. But in this case, is that they did, and I was freed without any bail conditions from the same court, which is sort of extraordinary. And then the penny started to drop. I used to think everything was absolutely perfect in my union, the old Seamen's Union, and when I got out of jail, a lot of seamen and wharfies had put a lot of money in, particularly seamen, and I thought maybe I'd get some money to keep me going, so I didn't have a cent. But what happened is that a comrade ended up giving me a lift back to the prison. I got a letter from them, and I went down to the dole office and got a week's dole. So that was sort of like a subliminal message, is that stuck your head out. You don't stick your head out unless you have official approval of sticking your head out. And then continued on. I was elected I would end up as the honorary president of the Seamen's Union for 6 years in Queensland, and I got elected as an assistant secretary of the MUA. And I was that until '98 during the waterfront dispute, and we were proud to play a role there, and I think we did a fair job. until the end came, and where John Coombs and Greg Combay and the little gollywog, what's his name, Bill Kelty, where they snatched victory, they snatched defeat from the jaws of victory. John Cummins said that about the dispute. And overnight, the waterfront changed. A job where men went to work, men and women went to work, to go to work was a pleasure. They spent more time telling jokes than they ever did working. The whole culture was changed, and it became where there hadn't been a casual worker in the industry for 25 years. It became 50% casualised virtually overnight. And no matter what anyone will ever tell you who's in the hierarchy of the Maritime Union or in the ACTU, never, ever let it be said that the waterfront dispute was a victory. It might have looked like a victory in some Orwellian nightmare, but it was a comprehensive defeat for waterfront workers. We may have got the union, the bricks and mortar may have been saved, and the bricks and mortar may be an important thing to union leaders, but to the rank and file on the job, it certainly became a nightmare. After that, I left the Maritime Union. I got crook. I spent 5 years out of work. I ended up sleeping in parks. I got very sick. Ended up in mental institutions, depression, all that sort of caper. Got character assassinated from one end of this country to the other by the glorious hierarchy of certain unions, including the MUA. And I guess my corpse was all but written out. But through the love of a good woman, and through getting work in the construction industry, and through some great comrades here, including there's several of them here, but in particular men like Martin Thomas from Workers' Liberty in London, who I met, who was an absolute inspiration to me. I was able to get that, go on to work, eventually get elected as a BLF organiser, and that brings us into where I was in 2012 at the QCH dispute. The QCH dispute, as some people here would know, was a major Brisbane children's hospital that is still being built. It's a $1.5 billion project, and it was a huge undertaking. There was a lot of downturn in the Brisbane construction industry. This job will employ 1,800 men and women on it once it's in full swing, which it is now. However, the company that was running it's called Abigroup. A part of the Lend-Lease empire, and there was conflict on the job almost from day one. But in August last year, Abbey decided a gyp rocking contractor went belly up. Gyp rocking is on a construction site of the guys that put up the interior walls in a hospital, the walls around the interior walls of a building. And they went belly up. Now, what normally happens on a construction site is that the builder will pick up the pieces and then employ a decent contractor to complete the job. In this case, that wasn't it. Abbey refused to pick up a contractor and pay the correct rates, and so the workers on the site said, we're not going to have a situation on a $1.5 billion job that's government funded, and we're not going to have a situation where we're working beside people who are doing exactly the same job as us, being paid less than us. Just a simple, fundamental trade union principle. And with that, Abbey said, no, we won't agree. And with that, the site stopped work. 650 workers at that stage. The workers set up a picket line, and that went on for about 18 days. After the 18th day, the unions involved, the CFMEU and the Builders Labourers Federation, in Queensland there's still a BLF, but they're part of the CFMEU, and they were injuncted off the job along with the delegates. And I'd been playing, gone to a couple of pickets and whatever, and some of the rank and file workers came up to me and asked whether I'd be involved, and I said yes. I said I'll certainly help out if I can. And so we then, I was asked to sort of lead the guys from a community, the men and women from a community perspective. And for the next 32 days, we held the line. I'm very proud to say that we were able to run the dispute, as I mentioned last night, on some basis of Athenian democracy. Everybody had their say. Everybody felt to be a part of it. The strike was stronger on the 9th week than it was on the 2nd week. So that shows you the level of strength that was there. Once workers feel empowered about their struggle. To their eternal credit, to the eternal credit of construction workers, is that the protest line that was there was honoured. No one from that side crossed the picket line for 9 weeks. We were able to put in place committees where people were, we made sure that no one was evicted. Everyone was looked after to a degree. We were able to replace the cash system with the system of vouchers, where we had Coles and Woolworths vouchers, where people donated everything, so that for several reasons. One is that I said to the comrades that it's better we have no cash on this side. Everything was very heavy. There was a huge surveillance operation being deployed by Minter Ellison, who are Abigroup's lawyers, and we were able to get around that by doing such things. And in the end, after 9 weeks, Abbey folded. They tore up their non-union EBA and signed a new EBA which had a subcontractors clause in it. And so all those workers, it was an illegal strike. It was, you know, there were no Abigroup workers involved, because on a construction site it might have Multiplex or Abbey or Lend-Lease. They don't employ anybody. All they do fundamentally is manage a building site. The subcontractors build. So we were successful, but after the 9th week, the workers voted to return to work, and then 36 hours after that, I was hit with these criminal contempt charges, 54 of them. Where we are at the present time with these criminal contempt charges is that 36 of them have been dropped off. There's 18 that are still going. My legal team's of the opinion I'll probably be convicted. We're fighting on technicalities at the present time. Where it leads from there, I'm not sure what the magistrate will do. Contempt of the magistrate's court is the same as contempt of the High Court. So they're looking at it as a very serious event. If it comes down to sentencing, the Queensland government then intervenes, has been given leave to intervene, where they have said that they'll be seeking the harshest possible punishment, which is, you know, jail or whatever. And if that comes about, and we'll see what happens. But also on top of that, as Jerome was saying, that's criminal contempt. Contempt's been around for at least 500 or 600 years. So that's the laws they're hitting us with. There's another set of a trial that's been set down for 8 days, where I've been enjoined with the CFMEU and the BLF, where they claimed that I was acted as an agent of the union. Well, anybody who knows me, I was an agent of the rank and file. I wasn't an agent of any union bureaucracy. And that'll be argued out, but what they're trying to get out of me for that one is for the 32 days where I was fortunate enough to lead the community workers and the community support group, and they're hitting up for about $300,000 a day in damages. That's about $9.6 million. So, and then that's under the tort of nuisance, which has been around about another 7 centuries. So they're using these ancient English common laws to try to break the back of trade union resistance. And they're using them now even on community activists, where they didn't do that previously. They always pulled back. There's a comrade here, a wonderful comrade, Dave Kieran from Union Solidarity, who has played an instrumental and brilliant role in helping workers achieve their outstanding claims by utilising community community power. But all that said and done is that certainly I won't be paying any fines. It's a different type of repression than what I've seen before in my life. I've seen a few of them. When I was jailed during the secret dispute at the picket line on April the 17th, 1985, I was also charged and eventually convicted of 4 assault charges against police and a bodily harm charge because a cop broke his hand on me head, punching me in the head. He broke his hand. It was quite humorous in the end because at the stage where we were all arguing about it, he came in as, I'll never forget him, Sergeant Barclay, a young, thick-set bloke, and we virtually punched on in the court. It was up and down the court. It was just like complete chaos. But you wonder why the establishment's got a bit of a grinder, some sort of something to grind against me at the present time. But I'm a big boy and I can handle that. But what worries me is what's going to happen to other comrades who face this same sort of attack, because if Abigroup get away with this, corporate Australia is going to use it as a template to try to break the back of community protests, because they've jerry-rigged the fact that the community protests are taking the place of unions when unions feel that they're unable to fight. Now, I'll try to sum this up because I know I've taken up too much of your time. And this is where we have to learn things. If you ever hear a union official say, keep your powder dry, Bot's clever. One idiot said to me, oh, the fight goes for 15 rounds, Bob. And I said, yeah, but if you're knocked out in the first, it doesn't go for 14 more, you imbecile. To tell them, quite distinctly to go and get themselves fucked, because it's not right and it's anti-solidarity, it's anti-working class. The grouping of great people here and throughout this whole conference are going to be absolutely valuable, imperative that we all get together and we fight together so that we can do the things like what happened in the Clario Shade, because unions today have turned, in a large degree, turned into conservative bricks and mortar organisations. They're more interested in looking at balance books than they are about whipping up solidarity amongst their membership and amongst the huge tide of unorganised labour that's out there at present. To sum this up, in 1991, and I'll leave it just like this. In 1991, there was a 9-month strike of coal miners in the United States at a place called Pittston. It went for 4,500 coal miners were out on strike for 9 months. In that time, 4,000 coal miners and their officials and also their supporters were arrested, many jailed for quite considerable periods of time. The United Mine Workers of America was hit with $63 million worth of fines. They refused to pay them and said that they couldn't settle the dispute until they got fixed up along with the people who were jailed who were released. And after 9 months, they won. But during that strike, there was a lone union picket, a woman, and she had a sign that to this day I never forget, and it said, "The struggle goes on, the cause endures, hope still lives, and our union will never die." Thanks, comrades.